walking in, knowing only what the client has told you is not a good way to start doing anything else. People would be on my case if I were out of the office 3 hours walking through the client's actual brand experience.
This is The Strategy Inside Everything. I'm Adam Pierno.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of The Strategy Inside Everything. We have a very special guest today, Farrah Bostic. How are you, Farrah?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm jumping right to the introduction of Farrah because there's two reasons. One, if you're a listener to the show, you know she has already been on the show. She is our first two-time guest ever.
Do I get a jacket like the repeat guest stars of SNL?
Yes, one of those vinyl jackets from the 90s with like teal lettering on it. I think
Perfect.
Watch your mailbox. This is coming your way.
Okay.
Farrah, of course, is the founder and strategy director at The Difference Engine. She was on one of the first half dozen episodes of this show, and she still talks to me. So I think that's a great sign. We've been talking for a little while before we got going here. But Farrah, for those of the newcomers to the show who did not get to hear your fantastic background, give them a quick rundown of who you are and what you've done to this point in your career.
Yeah. So this is exciting, being the first repeat. I didn't realize that I was so early on either. That's very exciting.
You're a superstar.
Serious OG on this. So yeah, my background is one of those meandering path backgrounds. I started out as a copywriter and then moved into account planning because I was interested in where the briefs I was receiving came from and how those got created. I had a bit of a journalism background as well. So of course, the kind of research and reporting side of being a planner was appealing, and also have a general slightly annoying tendency to want to understand how the actual underlying business works and what the problem the client really is trying to solve is. And it makes me a terrible agency employee, but a pretty good strategist.
It makes you a terrible copywriter and creative director. Be like, listen, just write the thing. Like, don't ask any more questions.
Exactly. Enough. Just go write something. But I also had really good early mentors on the creative side who were very much about, you're not going to be a good writer if you're not out in the world experiencing things and understanding the world from the consumer's point of view and that sort of thing. But it really felt like if you wanted that to be your job, you had to be on the strategy side. And then I went to law school, as you do, and got out of law school.
The normal path of every copywriter, for
Totally. Yeah. To some degree, went because I enjoyed the writing on The West Wing. So that's how old I am.
Oh my God. I heard they're bringing it back. So,
oh God, please don't. It's too much. And anyway, I graduated from law school, and the next day started working at a brand and communications research consultancy called Holland Partners. And there I worked for about 4.5 years, ran the innovation practice towards the end, to the extent we had one, and then left there, went to work at a company called OTX, started getting interested in building products for qualitative research, actual like software tools for it. In the end, that company got sold to Ipsos, and Ipsos wasn't really interested, at the time at least, in building software. So I took a powder there, and freelance for a little bit, wound up at Digitas for a spell, worked on Samsung, Amex, a couple other little things here and there, and then was able to confirm that I was still not a good agency employee. And so went back out on my own. And so it's been since 2011 running the Difference Engine and figuring out what that was all about. And so what we do is help business leaders make big decisions. And that's either through a process of helping them get the information they need to make those decisions, and then helping them make sense of that information, and then helping them make the decision. Or sometimes it's they're awash in information. They've got data coming out of their ears. They just don't know what to do with it. So we help them puzzle through that, make sense of it, and make decisions.
It's feast or famine. It seems like it's the way it is today.
Totally.
And so I reached out to you after seeing Twitter and LinkedIn posts from you where you had gone and went out into the world and quote unquote acted like a consumer or what I call you're a person.
Yes.
But you went out and you actually experienced things from the vantage point of the audience you're trying to understand.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about can you talk about the project itself, or do you have to be general?
I can be a little specific and a little general. It was for a department store brand. And so it kind of is perfect. For one thing, you can in fact just go to a department store. I don't have to get security clearance or anything.
Like coveting the idea of a department store?
Yes.
Didn't you? Like, were you asking for this?
Yes, I did. It's the funniest thing. I just thought of that like a week ago. That yes, like when Barney's was declaring bankruptcy again, I was like, someone pay me to work on this.
I think I remember this. I think I remember you talking about like, I really want to do this. I want to solve this problem.
Yes. I don't usually go in for that kind of the secret sort of way of thinking about the universe, but this time it worked.
Yeah,
totally
it really did. I think
everybody tweet about it.
I'm going to take, if you tweet about it, it'll happen. It worked for the president and it's working for you.
Oh God. Yes. Yes. So it's for a department store. We had, kind of a week of setup and recruiting where I couldn't actually be interviewing anybody. So I took that time to do what used to be a time-honored tradition for most brand strategists, which was to actually go experience the product. So I took myself to the department store and to some of its offshoot locations, and then to some of its competitors and some of the other stores and restaurants in the neighborhood. And to the casual observer, it looked like I was shopping and having lunch. But
did you in fact have lunch?
I didn't have lunch. I did have a donut. It was delicious. And a coffee that was also very good. I did not sit for lunch.
So were you the creep that was watching people over the pile of jeans, or were you just watching from afar?
So what I did was a quick sort of lay of the land walkthrough. I did one creepy thing, which was I took my phone and turned it camera side out and held it to my chest and pressed record and did a video, basically got video of my walkthrough.
Your walking path. Yeah.
Yeah. Which was, so it was several stories, department stores. So I went up to the top and sort of worked my way back down again. And on the way back down, turned off the camera and talked to people. And so, noticing things and saying, so what is that? And how does that work? And, oh my gosh, I've never seen anything like this before. And sort of floor by floor would pause and find some place to sit and jot down some notes about things that I had seen and what people seemed to be doing and how people seemed to be interacting and what people looked like and things I noticed. Yeah.
And your takeaways, I'm sure, were valuable for that project, that client, that business problem. But more importantly, for the agency people or strategy professionals, I think the takeaway I got was, how come we're not reminding everybody? Why don't we talk about doing this more? Like, why aren't there rules of the road for this? And why isn't this a huge part of the discovery process that there's so much focus on analytics and digital and data, but this is none of those things. And it can carry a lot of the load or guide how those things work.
Yeah, it can. And I think, there are a couple of things that as I've been having conversations with people since the thread and since the Medium post about what's going on here. And some of it, I think, is a little bit of kind of what's happening in agency culture where, the recommendation I got years ago from Janet Champ when I was interning creative assistanting at Wieden & Kennedy to, if I didn't have anything specific to do in the office, to go like see a movie, shoot pool, walk around downtown, whatever, like go get into some trouble and then come back. That seems to have gone away. The need to perform work and be seen in the office and be available for the next meeting or what have you is palpable. And so you don't leave the office. I think maybe there's an expectation implicit that if you're going to do those things, you're going to do it on your own time, whatever that means. And then I think the other part of it is this sense that all the information I need is somehow readily accessible through a Google search.
Right.
And so I'll look at the brand website, I'll, see what people are saying on Twitter or on Facebook about it. And, what else do I need to know? Maybe find a couple of publicly available trend pieces.
But especially in this category, or any retail category where there's a physical location, it's the dumbest, easiest thing to do. I mean, I remember coming up and being trained at I won't name the brands, but at a major donut manufacturer's university that they have, and then again at a pizza brand's training ground where they actually showed you how to do the things, make the stuff, how service works. It showed you how the micros works, and you got to experience it and generating campaign ideas and insights about the employees that we could play against customers. Yeah, that led to really good work.
Yeah. No, I think that's, having worked on, this is the first time I worked on a department store brand, so that was exciting. But having worked on other, particularly like technology brands, they may not have, I did work on Apple for a while, but it was before they launched the stores. I worked on Samsung for a while, and they do have their own stores, but we weren't looking at their retail experience. Yeah, ish.
Those are dubious, yeah.
but they still sell through a channel, and going and being in the channel, seeing what it's like in a Verizon shop, as people are shopping for phones and chatting with people as one might if you were an extrovert, then you start to get a feeling for how people are thinking about what the brand is and how they make choices in the category and what they think is interesting or not. And just encountering humans doing things in their natural habitats as a fellow human is incredibly enriching. And it certainly doesn't answer every question, and it's not going to quantify everything that you observe, but it is going to give you a starting point to start figuring out what matters and what doesn't, what's a really big issue and what's not, what's common, what's uncommon.
Yeah. And it's the same as doing qual before quant, right? Yep. I mean, as we were just saying, I just came from focus groups, which are oftentimes tedious. Sometimes they feel like a waste of time, but sometimes when they're pulled off well, there's usually something you can grab onto and say, oh, okay, there's
Absolutely.
I hadn't thought about that. And you do that so that you can shape the quant, so that you can shape the data that you're going to go chase, or what you're going to gather. Yep. Same thing of walking through a department store. It's what are the things here that are worth thinking about, because there's a million things that I could think about.
Absolutely. And it's where, the pairing of going and directly observing something and then also documenting it as you go is really important, I think, because just as an anecdote, one of the things that, as I was going through the photos I'd taken, I took pictures of signage, I took pictures of anything that was promotional. There was a section of like fancy party dresses, and there was a small rack near the fancy party dresses of what is known as shapewear, the undergarments that make the party dresses look nice. Those belong in a different department, but someone had the presence of mind to stick some next to the party dresses. And I thought someone was thinking. So
it belongs right there. I mean, contextually, and that's the thing that you can't, Amazon would show you that when you get to your cart down below, it would say people who bought this also bought that.
Exactly.
But that's okay IRL too.
Yes, exactly. It's putting the peanut butter next to the jelly. So, that made sense. I took all sorts of pictures of that sort. But one of the ones I noticed later on was that near one of the kind of customer service desks, there was a bowl of water for dogs, and then a jar with dog biscuits. Now, I hadn't seen any dogs in the shop. It did not even occur to me that it would be a dog-friendly place. And I didn't notice it at the time. It was only in going back through the photos that I went, hang on, this is apparently a dog-friendly store.
Did you go? You got to go back with the dog now.
Yes, definitely got to take the dog back. I'll just come rolling in with my 60-pound Irish setter. It'll be great.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're like, not that dog. No.
Yeah, they're like, what now? Though he does look like a Ralph Lauren model, so that does help. But so the documentation along the way, jotting things that you notice. The second thing that I noticed going back through the photos was that the salespeople were dressed appropriately for the section that they worked in. Like in the athleisure section, the woman working there was in, cool, like high-tech joggers and a pair of sneakers and very fashionably dressed. But in the clothes she was selling, which
Right.
suggests she might know something about them.
Theoretically, yeah.
Yeah. And on my little video walkthrough, I didn't realize this, but I captured being greeted by sales staff no fewer than 4 times. So that was also a thing that wound up when we started doing interviews to be really important to people. People care about being seen.
Oh, and
go figure.
The exact right balance of the greeting versus feeling sold to versus help versus pushy. I mean, that's really easy to get wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I struck up a conversation with a woman who is a stylist. We've now become friends. But, that kind of getting her point of view on actually working in the store and what she likes about it and what she finds exciting about it or what's frustrating, all of that became really useful in actually talking to consumers. And then, frankly, in also talking to the clients, like being connected to I've been there, I've seen the product, I've talked to the people who work for you. That grounds you in their side of the experience. But also, frankly, a lot of our marketing clients don't spend a lot of time on the front lines with the sales staff or in the retail environment or at the point of purchase. So you're bringing something to them that they don't get to experience very often either. And I think that just rounds out the perspective on it. Yeah, I think I don't know why we are not insisting that it be done on almost every project we work on.
And in this method of the way you did it is almost secret shopper. So I'm not going to announce that I'm going. I'm just going to go observe and see what I find and come back. The neutrality, the third party nature, going there and being able to be objective.
Yeah.
That's what's valuable.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you tell the client, hey, let's go do this together. Well, then it's like, well, we better call the manager and let him know we're coming. And then guess what? Yep. It's like a food reviewer that tells the chef is there.
Yep. Exactly.
It's not going to get an impartial. They're going to be like, well, here's something the chef whipped up for you. Just a 20 course tasting menu just for you.
Yeah, exactly. And the kind of, one of the things that I teach at Parsons in the strategic design and management program, and one of the tools that we ask the students to do is called a service safari, which is literally a secret shopper. I'm going to go try out the product myself. I'm going to go where the product is used and observe other people using it. And I'm going to document that whole process. And it's not interventionist. It's not particularly, you can follow one up with an interview if you want. You can have conversations with people in a kind of natural sense. But the idea is just to go be in the situation as opposed to trying to read about it someplace else.
Right. Yeah. Googling it is only going to get you so far, and watching YouTube caps is only going to get you so far.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you posted about this and you wrote your article on Medium, obviously I'll link to that. What were people like? I don't know. To me, it seems I read, "Hey, Whipple, squeeze this." Luke Sullivan taught me this 25 years ago. I feel like, yeah, that's part of what I don't always do it, but I feel like somebody did tell me to do it. The people that mentored me early in my career gave me the latitude to do it. Is the feedback where people are like, oh yeah, I forgot about that we could actually go to the place and do the thing? Or is it more of what you said? There's the let's be tied to our desk so we're visible for our boss to know we're here.
Yeah. I think there were kind of 3 camps of response. And one was the well, yeah, obviously you should do this. Why are you not doing this already? Kind of just a duh response.
Yeah, right. That's fair.
It was kind of, cool thread, but yes, we do this all the time, and great. If that's happening, great. I think there was another group of people who were kind of like, oh, right, this is a thing we can do. And it doesn't really cost anything. I'm going to actually add a camp. There's a 4th camp. I'll come back to them. And then the 3rd camp was this, well, I don't feel like I have purchase to go and do this. I don't feel like I have permission. I don't feel like it's expected of me. I think people would be on my case if I were out of the office spending 3 hours walking through the customers, the client's actual brand experience, which is disappointing if true. And I buy it, actually, having spent some time in agencies where, the reaction to if you do escape the building for a while and you're not back in 20 minutes, where you been, what have you been doing?
Oh, yeah.
That pressure is real. The feeling that everything is kind of high pressure, all hands, all the time, I think is a real thing in agency life. Now, the fourth group was kind of funny, which was, I think, people, probably mostly people who are freelancers, who thought that I was giving this time away for free and that I had now devalued my expertise and my time to zero.
There's always some group that's going to object and be like, why are you ruining what I do? It's like, no, you missed something. Hold on, just let me, I didn't add the prologue here, which is in no way did I mean to offend freelancers, and my time was paid for. I was compensated.
Right. Yeah. And I just sort of said, look, if you're a freelancer doing this kind of work, I would strongly encourage you to build time into the estimate that allows you to get to know the client. That should be certainly your stakeholder interviews and your kickoff meetings and reviewing whatever secondary research that they want to share with you. But it should also include trying out the product. Like, it should include experiencing the brand. And if that means you need to pad it by an extra half a day, you should do that.
Or if it's like, if you're working on a soft drink and you need to buy a case of it, like, build that into the estimate or ask them to send it to you. Like, I have a feeling there's a lot of work that goes on where somebody has really never gotten near the thing they're working on.
Yeah.
And they go, well, I got a brief and then I rewrote it into my own brief. And now this is the website I made.
Right. And I think, this then leads me to a second conversation I had back in the summer with people on Twitter, which was about the problem of creative briefs. And some of the feedback I got there was that, the creative side of the equation feels like somehow the planners, the strategists have weeks and weeks and weeks to noodle on a creative brief. And then they push that out to this kind of last possible minute and then throw it over the fence to the creative teams who only have a few days to execute something to get in front of the clients.
Yes, just as we have been planning for 20 years. Let's get revenge on the creatives for being cooler than us.
Which I think is a statement about maybe we should be working in cross-disciplinary teams more. But then the retort from planners and strategists, which, been in their shoes, it's definitely a real thing, is you're not getting 2 weeks or a month or whatever to write a creative brief. You're only getting a few days. You also are in a holding pattern waiting on stuff that the client's supposed to be giving you so that you can start to do that work. And by the time you're anywhere near, getting that stuff, you're so close to the deadline that the easiest thing to do is to rewrite the client brief into a creative brief. It's also probably what your boss does. And so why would you do it some other way?
Right.
Which is, one of the reasons I stopped being a copywriter was, well, do I want to learn to write like my boss or do I want to still like writing in 20 years? So I guess I'll go be a planner now.
I'll go do something different. Yeah. That's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. But I do think there's a feeling that, I think it's related to the kind of historical fact of a lot of agencies not really thinking of themselves and their business model as inclusive of getting paid to do strategy. That strategy is this kind of perk we offer clients, and we take money out of commissions and markups in order to be able to pay for that. And that's a sad state of affairs, obviously. But I thought that was getting better as we're all being forced to do project work instead of being AORs. Evidently not.
No.
We have kind of the equivalent of technical debt in terms of how agencies operate, where like all these kind of old ways of doing things are still kind of baked into the processes. And as the projects get smaller or more ad hoc or whatever, we don't change anything about how stuff works. We just feel more pressured.
Yeah, the model is the model, and we just absorb more and more of the work at the same rate. Even though strategy has moved up the agency nav structure, it's gotten closer to the logo on every agency website, but it hasn't. We haven't actually figured out. I don't know what percentage of agencies have the courage to charge for it. It's probably the 6 or 8 agencies you can think of right now. It's like, I know them for strategy. Like BBH, they're charging you for strategy. Yeah. Most small to mid-sized agencies, they're probably just throwing that in.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're charging you more for your social listening and then figuring out how to eke out some for strategy work.
Yeah. But I think that also speaks to, the idea that sort of doing strategy the way a BBH might do it or a Wieden & Kennedy might do it or, whomever is costly and time consuming and requires large budgets and sign off from clients in order to do it. And, I did not ask anybody's permission to go shop the client's store. I just did it. And,
Right.
and it, does it appear directly in any of the deliverables to the client? No, but I am sharing those assets with the pictures and the videos with the creative agency, who find it really useful because they're not even in the country. So they don't get to shop in this particular department store. So that is useful to them in kind of a just additional fodder for their own musing. But it helped me frame discussion guides and think about recruitment, and then think about how to frame the things that I had heard from people about what they care about in a shopping experience based on what I actually had experienced myself. So I could go, oh, I saw that. That would really annoy me, but apparently other people love it.
Right. I watched people actually smile as they experience this. So it must be, I think it's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's encountering reality. So it's important to go run into it every once in a while and see what happens.
Strategy has become there's a cult of strategy that's grown up over the last 5 years, and it is talked about as this thing that solves all these problems. But I think a lot of it is grounding. It's really just putting the ropes around the ring of what are we going to talk about, what's in bounds and what's out of bounds. And it, like when you're walking through the store and you witness the salespeople wearing the outfits or dressed to match the department they're in, that's very grounding that that. And you probably would not have any clue of that. You probably would have expected everybody to be wearing the similar kind of, just casual Friday attire in every unit. And then you don't really have that sense, but when you go to see it, now you have this grounded understanding that you can explain to people in a different country, which you didn't mention at the top, Farrah. I have to tell you. That's
sorry.
Important. That's a very important fact. That's huge.
Yeah.
So you get to be the translator for this. And this is what the experience is through these pictures. I'm sure you added text to help bring it together and give them the narrative that they could follow along with your your video.
No, it's very handy nowadays that you can mark up the photos. So circled things and drew arrows and wrote comments on them. And, they have the raw version of the photos, but then they also have the marked up versions where it's like, this is the thing to pay attention to in this photo. That's, it works for sports broadcasters. Why can't it work for us?
Yeah, exactly. Just got to get Troy Aikman on us. Been doing strategy, you didn't even know it.
Yeah, exactly. But I think there's a lot about I go back to early days, junior planner Shia Day, and having someone say the job of a planner is to be the voice of the consumer in the agency. And I think that's now not the only job of a planner, but it is still part of the job. And so an interesting way of doing that is to put yourself in a position where the consumer is no longer an abstraction. And it's also not somebody who is kind of lower down than you on the sort of social hierarchy of the whole relationship. Yeah. And, they're not a thing you have to manipulate or represent. They're just other people in the world next to you, and being among them. I mean, the difference obviously is like, look, the average person in that store was not noticing all the signage and caring about the upholstery and noticing what people who worked there were wearing and eavesdropping on the managers explaining specials or whatever. Like, that was not probably what most people were doing. So I was certainly more attentive to more things than the average shopper would be. That's fine. But I also was just among other people. And as far as anybody who was working there was concerned, I was another customer. So that sort of humanizes everything, and I think democratizes everything. It's no longer me being oracular. It's just me going out and being more of a reporter, really.
Oh, that's interesting. What are the other jobs of planners? If not to be not to represent the customer, the consumer, the audience.
I think the reality is, and actually I'm going to go hard on these journalism references. So
go. I like this.
When I was in journalism school, I also had a sort of student magazine that I worked on. And one of the guys that I worked for initially at that student magazine talked about the managing editor is the center of the hourglass. There's all this stuff coming in and there's all this stuff that's got to go out. And the managing editor's job is to keep track of what all the writers are working on and to review all of their copy and then to make sure everything gets placed in the right spot in the magazine and we know which issue it's going into and we've reserved our time on the press and all of that kind of stuff has happened, and that's the job of the managing editor. And I think in some respects there's something analogous to what a strategist or a planner is in that, which is, yes, they are the voice of the consumer, but they also have to be connecting what the consumer needs and wants and is experiencing and what the opportunity for unmet, unarticulated needs are to what the client's business objectives are. I think there's also that job. I think if you get to, like we were saying before, like bad copywriting employee, if I'm asking too many questions about the client's business model, when really I just need to go write some lines, probably not the best way for the creative team to spend their time. But you can find some really interesting opportunities for a client if you really understand their business.
Right.
And understand the forces that are at play in their business and understand where they think they're headed strategically, which is where I also come back to like, hey, desk research is super cool. It's not just Googling though. Like you're dealing with a publicly traded company. How about you download their annual report and read their 10K? You might learn something about where they think they're strategically headed.
And that of their competitors or adjacent businesses. And
exactly.
Yeah. And start mapping that out.
Yeah.
Do you think that role of the planner, because I think planners have been tasked with developing those insights that bridge the customer to the business. Mm-hmm. But I think in the last 4 or 5, 10 years, it's been more about the business, the commerce that they're connecting versus the brand. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's true?
I think there is some truth to it. I think, one of the things that has certainly been true over the last 5 to 10 years has been this, I think, look, the advertising business is always looking to some other industry for inspiration, always looking to figure out, is there a good idea I can steal here? Right?
I want to be anything but an ad agency, for sure.
Exactly. And so exactly. So the last 5 to 10 years, it's how can an ad agency be more like a tech company or a software startup? And I think a lot of the thinking around lean and agile and all of the kind of startup stuff, and I certainly was part of the advocacy for a more lean approach to planning, but I think some of the sort of reference texts there, I mean, it was like reading Peter Thiel's book and reading The Hard Thing About Hard Things, and like it got more frankly about management, I think, than it got to be about brand.
Management and conversion optimization.
Yeah.
So that everything got boiled down and abstracted into, I want A to do X.
Yep. Yeah. So, performance marketing, traction, all of those books. And I think a lot of that is just this pressure that agencies feel of as the AOR relationships erode or get smaller, as more things are project-based, as we continue to encounter client feedback that says, I can't, how can I really trust you to help me build my brand when I don't think you really understand my business? The marketing companies being bought by management consultancies and the digital studios being bought by management consultancies, and feeling like that's the next wave of competition isn't coming from a hot new agency in San Francisco. It's coming from McKinsey, right? Or Bain or
Deloitte,
something like that. Yeah. So that's terrifying. But reasonable as a fear. And so the response has been, well, we'll hire MBAs, or we'll hire people who come from startups, or we'll hire people who've read all the books that those people have read, and we'll talk that game for a while.
Yeah.
And so why would you ever...
those guys have strategy very close to their logo.
Yes.
And they know how to get paid for it.
That's true. Yeah. And I think, and that was probably why they made those kinds of hires and why they started talking about the kinds of things that they talked about. It's how do we get, and I relate right? I moved from copywriting to strategy to research. It's like, how much further upstream can I get from the end product, which is an ad? And I think that's also part of what's going on, is everybody wants to have the ear of the CEO, wants to feel close to the highest, most clients so that they can retain these relationships for longer. The churn is real. And so maybe if we can be more strategically placed with our clients, they'll be less likely to fire us or farm the work out to somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
There are real structural imperatives here. It's not just laziness, right?
No, I know. But then I think back to your junior planner who's asked to go solve that. Mm-hmm. I mean, pretty much that's what they get. It's like, well, now you have to go do that. You have to be the voice, but also figure this out and compete with Bain and Deloitte. Mm-hmm. Well, jeepers creepers. How are they doing that? You're like, can I just write a brief? I've got 2 weeks. Now you get 48 hours. I think the number I saw was 48 hours from Mark Pillard's survey of how long people typically get. Right?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. And the ability to do that well at that speed, at a certain point, sometimes I think about some of the, research consultancies I've worked in where the qualitative teams are nothing but senior people, because the cost of training junior people to be as fast and smart and good at scale as the senior people are is just insurmountable. So there are times when I would just wonder, like, why are there junior planners in agencies at all if you're not going to bother training them?
Right.
And you should only have senior people. If you're going to have these 48-hour turnarounds, the only people who can do that have worked across a lot of brands, have a lot of experience. They're in fast twitch mode. They can do that. But instead, we're asking junior planners who've worked on like 2 other accounts and have never been in a room with a creative director and have never been in a room with a client to come up with a great creative brief. I think the other thing we do is expect the creative brief to walk right up to the edge of being the creative idea.
Yeah.
And like writing the headline or the tagline, but stop. Be brilliant and creative and practically an ad, but not so much that you piss off the creative team.
Well, don't even, I mean, that's probably a whole different, not only an episode of a podcast, but in a mini series, because the idea that when I was a creative, the planners I worked with said, well, I was taught to visualize an ideal form of this insight coming to life as a creative execution, but not tell you what it is. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, that's one way to do it. Why don't you just tell me what it is, and then we can build on it or argue about it constructively to help us get to the place. And even again, going back to Twitter conversations, which is such a wonderful and practical place to have a nuanced conversation, as you know.
Yes. Very much.
You raise that issue of, creatives, do you want a starter idea or not? And I mean, it gets contentious in about 13 tweets. People are like ready to go to war, Hatfield and McCoy style. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely schools of thought.
Yeah, there definitely are. And I've worked in both kinds of places where the creatives don't want a thought, don't want an idea, a starter idea. But they do want enough to go on that they can start to build something. And it can't just be like, here's a smattering of things I saw, right? Some sort of sense has to be made out of it. Some sort of story has to be told. But it's not a story that's going to immediately lend itself to execution. And then you have the other side, which is like, actually, it helps me trust you as a strategist that you've really pressure tested the story you're trying to tell me. If you can give me 5 bad ideas that fit the brief.
You've tested to see if this can be articulated in a 2-dimensional or a video form, that whatever the thing I'm being asked to make, you've thought about it, and okay, you've proven there's some terrible things, and now my job is to go make some great things. Yeah,
exactly.
Oh boy. Well, I think we've solved it, don't you?
Yeah, no, totally cracked it.
Well, there is definitely value. I am surprised that people, I saw your post and nodded and was like, yeah, of course. Yeah, we should be doing more of that. And of course we forget that we can go do that, and Google doesn't have everything, or even my entire digital toolkit of links that I keep. But it's funny that people almost will, there is a yang to every yin. Somebody will argue like, no, that's a waste of time. Just go right to quant.
Yeah.
Like, with what?
Yeah, exactly.
What are we quantifying?
And I think even within qualitative research, there are people who believe that the best way to do qualitative research is as a researcher to do it as a blank slate. Like I don't need to know a lot about the client. I don't need to know a lot about whatever. We're just going to go do some interviews or do some groups and see what comes out. And I just don't think that works particularly well. I think you have to have some context in order to have a good conversation. Otherwise, it's, if you imagine going to a party where you don't know anybody and trying to get into a really deep conversation, some people will go there with you. Most people, you just have to have this really awkward feel around to figure out are we just going to really irritate each other here? Do we have anything in common at all? Do you want to talk?
Right. You're going to go through the same rote, five questions and answers with each person until something bumps into you that you say, oh, I can ask a sixth question.
Exactly. But, if you already know the people there, or you know something about them, or you know why they have all gathered in this one place at the same time, then you can start to ask smarter questions and get deeper faster. I think walking in, knowing only what the client has told you or shared with you about what it's like to buy this thing or to experience this thing is not a very good way to start doing anything else. If you're going to do other research, whether it's writing a survey or talking to people in a qualitative environment, if you have not experienced it yourself, you're relying on hearsay. You're relying on a whole lot of secondhand information. And I've seen it backfire before, where someone thinks they understand what the brand or the product is like. They start describing it to the client, and the client's like, okay, clearly you haven't actually ever been on our plane or eaten in our restaurants or shopped in our stores or tried our phone or whatever. Right?
And I hate to say it, but if we all trusted implicitly what the client said and executed, every brand would be the best in their category, and there would be no insights because there'd be no competitive tension. It would just be like, we're also number one. We promise. This person told us. You know what I mean? There's nothing to sink your teeth into there.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you kind of have to find the flaws and figure out which cracks are actually refracting something beautiful.
Yeah. I also think it's one of the reasons I was drawn into strategy to begin with was that it was still a craft, right? It was not a complete switch from being a copywriter to being a suit, whatever that means, right? And so now I get to do things like explore this universe a bit and learn some things about it and gather some evidence and interact with some people and ask some questions and start to think about things. But there is a craft to the doing of that work, and that we're not training junior planners on that we're not valuing it, that we're not expecting it to be done, means that we're reverting into a place where it starts to look like, oh, well, all the things that those people do is probably eventually something that we can, train up an algorithm and do some machine learning on, and they'll, produce a brief at the end.
Robo
and it's
planners.
That's not going to be it's not going to be great either. We'll wind up in the same position as if the clients were the ones writing the briefs, right?
Yeah, and the robots will get 4 weeks to write the brief.
Well, because they won't just write the brief, they'll also write the ads. So,
of course. Yes, we'll all just be home not working. It'll be fantastic.
Yeah.
Our wonderful future.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I hate to actually end this conversation. I'm just enjoying bullshitting with you. So, but it is time to go. All right. It's late on the East Coast. I know you have to get back to work.
It's true. Yes, I've got to get this dog walked and then figure out what I'm having for dinner.
The truly important stuff.
Exactly.
Oh, I see the dog in the background. Yeah,
yes.
That's a beautiful dog.
Yes, he's very pretty.
Well, listen, thank you, Farrah, for joining. I really appreciate you coming on 2 times now. I owe you one. So when you start a podcast, I'll come on yours twice. I'll be your first 2 guests will be me. Okay, sounds good. You're like, please, anything but that. No, I think it would be a good gag. It'd be a good way to kick something off. People will know. Yeah. People will definitely know. Totally. Hey, where can people find you online? So Twitter is a good spot to have conversations at Farrah Bostic. And then obviously the website, thedifferenceengine.co. Yes. And I will link to both of those and to the Medium post that triggered this whole thing.
Also Medium.
Yeah.
But I'm irregular on Medium. So
and most people are, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, this has been great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam. It's nice talking to you.
Wait, don't stop listening. The show's not over. If you liked what you just heard, or you've liked any of the episodes of The Strategy Inside Everything, do me a favor. I really appreciate it. Leave a review wherever you listen to the show, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever. Please leave us a rating and a review. Please, if you can, share this episode or another episode with a friend. Let them know what you liked about it. That helps us quite a bit. If you have ideas for guests, for topics, follow up on episodes you've heard, you can tweet at us at @apierno, that's me, or at strategy_inside, that's the show. Either way, I promise I will respond to you and get back to you right away. And listen, running this show is a labor of love. I really do it just because I enjoy the conversations, but it does cost money. So web hosting costs money, microphones cost money, my kids' haircuts cost money. If you wouldn't mind, look at our Patreon. It's Patreon, Adam Pierno there, and you could help us out quite a bit. For more information about all the guests we've had, anything you want to know about the podcast, my 2 books, Underthink It and Specific, or ways to engage with me as a strategy consultant or as a speaker at your next event, please go to adampierno.com and you'll find all the information you want. And if you can't, just send me a note. Thanks a lot.